Do. Hello, everybody. Hi, friends. How are we doing today? I don't know how many people are here, but I'm kind of nervous because this is my first time doing a live book review by myself, but I'm pretty sure that I got this. Oh, yay, friends. Hi, Roro. Just vibing. Love that. I've been vibing all morning thinking about all the book club meetings I have today because I have two. I have this one and then I have another one for Death of the Author. So I'm excited for that. Hey, Hermie. Hey, yay. I'm so glad. Okay. I'm pretty sure, I think Hermie read this because I saw you in the Discord. Roro, if you read this, let me know. I'm excited to talk about it. I'm also emotionally bracing myself because it's very heavy. And if you would have ever told me that I'd be talking about a Hong Kong book live, I would have been like, that is so brave because these books are heavy. So, promise myself, I'm not going to get too emotional. Okay, cool. So, this is going to be a live review for We Do Not Part by Hong Kong, which is their newest novel that came out this year. Before I get started with talking about the review, and if you have any thoughts about this along the way, I'm going to talk a little bit about what books the book club is going to be reading next month in case anybody would like to join us for those in the upcoming future. So, the Annotation Station is a book club that I started this year with a goal of staying informed. We read 2 books every month, one nonfiction and one fiction that I choose, but I'm open to receiving recommendations from club members. And if you would like to join our Discord and talk about the books, you can become a channel member at any level. But I will also be posting what books I'm going to be reading for all of my book clubs on my Instagram and other social media. So even if you're not in the book club, but you just want to know what we're reading and then tune into the live shows, you can find out what we're doing there, and all of that is in the description below. So for the month of March, we are going to, our nonfiction pick is going to be On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. So if you want to read this with us in March, it's really tiny. It's literally like 110 pages, 120 pages, but like, look how teeny tiny, right? It's 20 lessons from the 20th century. And the reason that I chose this is because it just kept coming up on my social media feed, like my Book Talk For You page. I guess because of things that I was researching based on current events. And the way that this was sold to me is like the handbook on how to spot fascism and like, not promoting violence, but like Nazis are not allowed here. So if you want to know how to spot one, this is that. And I feel like this is very timely and helpful. Also, I'm going to be trying to navigate talking about all the topics today in ways that are not triggering, hopefully for you, hopefully for the algorithm, because we have a lot of heavy things to talk about. Also, the other book that we're going to be reading in March for our fiction pick, and I will share screen right now so that you can see, is going to be Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Oh, you ordered it. Yay! You're going to order it. Yes, I'm so excited to talk about it because I feel like there's a lot to learn. So, in March, we're reading James Baldwin, and this is the story of taking place in the 1950s Paris. Baldwin's haunting and controversial second novel is his most sustained treatment of sexuality and the classic of gay literature. In 1950s Paris, swarming with expatriates and characterized by dangerous liaisons and hidden violence, an American finds himself unable to repress his impulses despite his determination to live the conventional life he envisions for himself. After meeting and proposing to a young woman, he falls into a lengthy affair with an Italian bartender and is confounded and tortured by his sexual identity as he oscillates between the two. Examining this mystery of love and passion in an intensely imaginative narrative, Baldwin creates a moving and complex story of death and desire that is revelatory in its insight. So it's classic fiction, LGBTQ, queer, romance, literary gay fiction. So very excited to talk about that in March. Okay, cool. So now that we've got that business out of the way, let's talk about We Do Not Part. I don't think that I'm going to be able to do any non-spoilers for this. So if you're here watching this video, please be aware that there is going to be a lot of spoilers because we have things to talk about. But first, before I talk about the book, I'm going to tell you about the history that this book is set on. Because something that Hong Kong does really well, and I believe totally makes sense as to why they won the Nobel Prize in 2024, is because Hong Kong, from what I've seen and read for them, writes books about specific instances of revolution in Korean history, or writes about people whose voices are typically oppressed by society, and then gives them voices either through actually giving this person who has passed a voice, or creating characters that have lived through that timeline through research, through talking to people who have survived these instances, and also creating characters that gives us a like both zoomed in look at people who are living through said trauma, or like are in like adjacent circles, and how that trauma ripples out into a larger societal level. Um, so this book is super heavy because We Do Not Part is about something called the Jeju Massacre. And I did a ton of research about this in order to prepare for this. Also, because I would suggest if you're going to read this, it's going to be helpful to look into that history. And that history is hard because it takes place directly after World War II. So, the Jeju Massacre essentially happened because we're talking about 1947-48, exactly right after World War II. The United States is occupying South Korea. Soviet Union is occupying North Korea. And this is before there was a divide of the Koreas. So what's happening is Korea is finding itself while it's occupied by these two superpowers, but also it's trying to establish new government after being under Japanese imperial rule for so long. And this is like a moment of major transition for its citizens because Japan doesn't yet fully have its hand out of Korea. There's still a lot of rules that are in place, and America is kind of at its peak of get rid of anything that is communism, right? So Jeju is a small island on the bottom off the peninsula of South Korea. And this island is, I think, about 100 miles off the coast of South Korea. And so because of that, it is distant enough where its occupants don't necessarily have they're not like super intertwined with whatever's happening on the mainland. From what I researched, it was to the point where two things are really important here. One being that the people on this island are mainly farmers and like they're for agriculture. I think there's a little bit of mining and like other things like that. But most people there use wooden tools and mules, or like farm animals, or hand things. Like technology is not really a huge thing there as far as like infrastructure and industrial advancement. But they found success in being a majoritively matriarchal society. And the reason why this is so important is because the way that the United States looked at Jeju Island as it was coming out of World War II, and as it was on this movement to erase communism in the places that it is occupying, but also wants to set up dominance in, because let's be so real, the United States doesn't intervene with things in other countries because it cares about being the world police. It's because what are we going to benefit after the turmoil of whatever is happening here? Is it oil? Is it land? Is it borders that are closer to our enemies, to whatever the case might be, right? Weapons, whatever the case is. So what happens is, because of that, they look at this matriarchal society that is more or less socialist and says that's communism. And because of that, they go in and send troops and also work with remaining Japanese generals and people who are still kind of in that transition to say, hey, we will absolve you of your war crimes that you committed during World War II. And we will also absolve you from working with the enemy, right? Of working with Japan and Mussolini and Hitler and all that. if you do what we want to do, meaning the United States wants to do, by committing atrocities on this island to eradicate what they call the red wave. And if we look at the history and documentation of what was happening on the island, there were less than 3,000 people there who were part of any kind of like local militia or like organizations that were trying to keep any kind of like civil peace and maintaining what would have been called, I guess, communist practices. But it was such a small group in comparison to everything else that was going on. It didn't call for hundreds of thousands of people to perish. Doesn't make sense. So the United States has a very big hand in causing the Jeju massacre that this book is about. So I hope that history helps because it's very important to understand that. I think in order to understand the gravity of why this book is so important. Because just like Hong Kong's other books, like Human Acts, which talks about the Gwangju uprising. This is about the Jeju uprising. And I think their other book is actually referenced in here because there's a couple points where there are two words that are censored. One of them starts with a G and one of them starts with a P. The G one, I am pretty sure, I'm pretty 99% sure that it stands for Gwangju because the main character, Kyung-ah, is a writer. So it's kind of like an author self-insert. I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but to me, it felt like an author self-insert. And in it, they talk about a book that they previously wrote that talked about another situation similar to this in history. And Hong Kong has another book about the events in Gwangju. So that was interesting. The P, I'm not 100% sure on. I want to say it's Pyongyang because, again, this takes place before the Korean War. So I want to say that the P stands for Pyongyang, but if anyone else has an idea of what they think that the P in this book stood for, totally open to hearing it. And also please tell me your thoughts on the book as well, like what you rated it, what parts worked for you, what parts didn't work for you, if anything. I'm going to do my best to explain the general plot of the book, but there's so much to talk about. Hey, thanks for being here. How are you? How are you? Good to see you. Yeah, so, okay. Now, so I've explained a bit of the history just now behind the Jeju uprising. And so now let's start to talk about the general plot of the book and how it relates to those historical events, okay? So our main character is Kyung-ah. Kyung-ah is a writer. Kyung-ah is seriously depressed. Super trigger warnings because I personally interpreted some parts of this book as them dealing with a lot of self-harm ideations. And if that is something that is triggering for you, I think it's worth knowing before you go in. Yes. Oh my gosh. Human Acts is so good. I was literally just talking about it because I was talking about how they reference Human Acts in here, I think, because it's a self-insert of the author and they talk about there's a word in here that I'm pretty sure refers to Gwangju. So if you liked Human Acts, I really do think that you're going to like this because it's very similar in tonality and the way that they present the events to us. So if you liked Human Acts, you got to pick this up. And be prepared to cry. Be prepared to cry. Like, oh, it was so good. It was so good. Okay. So yeah, definitely recommend. So Kyung-ah is a writer. And she has a best friend named Inseon. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that name correctly. Inseon, I think. Hermie says, I was thinking about the P for so long, kept jumping out at me. Yeah, me too. It kept jumping out. Like there's an intention. There is definitely an intention behind the censoring of those specific events. And you tell me if you felt differently about it. I feel like the reason that these words were censored is because this book very much hinges on this like dreamlike place in which we are moving in between history and in which these characters are like reconciling with events that are actively in the forefront of their minds because they're giving space to history and when they actively want to remove themselves. So like this like censorship of the mind kind of thing. I don't know if that makes any sense. I can try to elaborate a little bit more. Hi, how are you? It's a sunny afternoon in Fort Worth. Oh, nice. Nice to hear that. Awesome. Did you read the book? If so, let me know. That's awesome if you did. If you're here to just learn some history and talk about it, that's great too. Yeah, so that's what I kind of think it was, especially because this book doesn't have quotations, which I think is important. So our Kyunga and Inseon, the two main characters, there's a lot of dialogue in here, but it happens without quotations. And I feel like that was very intentional. And I actually really liked it. Like it jumped out to me and I thought it was weird because I was like, what is happening? But as we keep going and it starts to get more dreamlike and like history gets woven into the contemporary settings, and there are some points where I started to wonder what is present and what is past. That kind of feels like the point, like all of it is intertwined. We need to reconcile with the pain that has reverberated through history in order to like heal from it or make amends, and to like give space for that. But tell me what you think. Oh, you read it. Awesome. Yay, I'm so glad. Okay, yeah. So tell me what you think about any of that stuff. Hi. I agree about the quotations. I think it was super impactful in the book as it went along, right? Right. That's exactly how I feel. It was very important. And I think as we get more to events that happen later in the book, that were a bit more dreamlike and a bit more like not rooted in reality, it really helps. It helps make it more impactful because I then started to question, is it important whether these words are actually being verbalized or just that they're being thought and felt? So, yeah. So in the beginning of the book, so Kyunga gets a phone call from her best friend, who lives on Jeju, and also trigger warning for bodily things. I mean, it's about an atrocity, so there's a lot of violence that happens. Yeah, makes sense. I think it just settled on it being a way to say this stuff could happen anywhere. Yes, yeah, I feel like you can be though. I feel like you are for sure. You are a deep thinker. But yeah, that's how I felt about it too. So that I think that's what the author was trying to say, that it can happen anywhere, you know? Poetic Monitoring says, I love the book. I haven't read Human Acts yet, but plan to this year. Also, I love the relationship the birds played in the book and all the imagery associated. Right. That's so important. So that's what I'm going to get to. What I'm trying to get to in a second is the birds, and what drove Kyunga to go take care of the birds. Oh, Human Acts is so good. That's probably my favorite Hong Kong book, honestly. I cried like a baby. I literally, like, it's one of the top 5 books that has made me sob. So brace yourself emotionally. I hope you love it. Let me know if you do. So, yeah, so Kyunga goes to Inseon, who is in the hospital because Inseon hurt themselves. They are a woodworker, and they have a project that they were trying to help Kyunga bring to realization, and they hurt themselves, in which they lost this. They lost a piece of this. So it is a bit graphic. So if you don't have the stomach for that, just letting you know. I don't know how anybody else felt about that. But when Kyunga goes to the hospital, Incheon asks, hey, can you go to my house in Jeju? And take care of my bird. There were 2 birds, right? What were their names again? He says, can we just use a... What do you mean? What do you mean, can we just use a? Sorry if I'm missing that. That's going over my head. So there's 2 birds. There's Ami. Is it Ami and Ama, I think? I hope I'm not messing that up. But one of the birds passed away, and so the other one is still alive. However, Incheon has been in the hospital in Seoul for a couple days or something like that, and there wasn't enough water and food, I think, left for the bird. And that's basically like Incheon's babies. So she asked her best friend to do her a solid and go to my house and take care of my bird before my bird's not going to make it. And there's a snowstorm coming. Kyunga is like, well, I don't know if I'm going to make it today because there's a snowstorm and all this stuff. And Incheon basically says, like, please, you have to. If you don't, my bird's not going to make it. They're not going to make it past tonight. I think they have budgies, like those teeny little baby birds. And so Kyunga decides to go. I think someone tell me if I'm skipping anything. I don't think I'm skipping anything. So Kyunga decides to go, and it's a long trek, and they have to take a bus. Can we just use a K and an I for the characters? So we don't have to write. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I get what you mean. Just if you mean in the chat or whatever, yeah, absolutely. Feel free. I'll know what you're talking about for sure. Yeah, it's Ami and Ama. Okay, good. So I think Ama was the one who passed away, or maybe it's Ami. I don't remember. But the one bird is still alive, right? So Kyunga goes, takes a couple buses, is making their way to their house. And in that journey of getting there, there's a lot of reflection on their relationship growing up, right? With Incheon and Incheon's mother, who becomes a really important character in this book. Hi, Howell. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. They're moisturized. Margaret, yay. Hi, Margaret. How are you? Did you read this book? We're talking about it. It's so good, Margaret. Oh, it's so good. I love it. Oh, okay. No worries. Come back when you've read it. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. Me neither. Got some words in now, getting ready for a live at the top of the hour. Oh, that's awesome. Great. Excited for you. Hey, everybody saying hi. Hi, friends. Thanks, Margaret. Miss your face. Maybe we can sprint sometime. So yeah, okay. So we get a glimpse at Kyunga is reflecting on her relationship with her best friend growing up. And what we learn is that Incheon's family has a lot of history with the events of the Jeju uprising because their family has been on Jeju for generations. And Incheon has a very strained relationship with their mother, especially because the mother has dementia. And so at night, the dementia gets worse. They're struggling to be able to reconcile with that. And their mother sometimes gets a little like aggressive, but other times slips back into time where she in her head thinks that she's still in the direct aftermath of the Jeju uprising and dealing with the trauma and fallout of that for her family. And it's like really sad. It's really sad. I don't think, if I remember correctly, that the mom is still alive. I think it's insinuated that the mom is gone because in the beginning, like the reason that Kyunga is the one who has to go is because there's no one else at the house. So I'm pretty sure that's the reason. So the mom is kind of gone. But Kyunga did meet her previously and is like thinking about her relationship as she's trying to push through the storm, and thinking about everything that she's gone through with her best friend. Say, okay, just keep going, just keep going. Before Kay went to see in the hospital, there was a lot of talk about her depression and losing her family. Yes. Okay, so yeah, that's what I read too. I was interpreting it as like contemplating because she was thinking about who could she write her will and testament to? I think that's correct. So Incheon lost a lot of people. Thank you, David, for reminding me about that. Yes, and the mom was gone. Right, exactly. Okay, cool. So I remember that correctly. Thank you. So the Incheon, the reason why she was so reflective on her relationship, the reason that Kyung-ah was so reflective on her relationship with Inseon was because she doesn't really have any other family. And her best friend is the closest thing that she has to family. And when she was thinking these self-harm ideation, she was like, who do I write my last will and testament to? And Inseon was the one that came to mind. But then Inseon called her and all this came up, right? So that kind of gives us our motivation for her to make this trek through the snow, through a blizzard, to go take care of her friend's budgie. That's how that goes. And there's also a point on the journey where she kind of gets lost in the dark and the snow. And I read that as she got so stuck in the snow where she was just lost and didn't know where to go, where she laid down and kind of gave up. And so I read that as like, again, more self-harm ideation, but she ended up surviving through the night. And then when the sun came up, she was able to find her friend's house, which I think goes back to this like recurring theme of hope throughout the book. So that was one of the first instances of, or earlier instances of hope, and how hope like pushes people through these traumatic experiences. So tell me if anybody else read that similarly. So Kyung-ah gets to her friend's house, and a lot of things kind of happen. So this is where the book gets a little otherworldly. Is that the best way to explain it? Like, tell me what word you would use for this if you read it. Like, how would you describe the transition between reality and what's happening in the house? Because Kyung-ah gets there, sees that the like workshop door attached to the house is left wide open. The blizzard got in. She sees, you know, the mess from her friend accidentally getting harmed, which led her to the hospital. She sees like all this stuff. And it's like so clear that the bird is gone, right? And that part really messed me up. I was like, no, not the bird. I love animals, and like anything that has to do with animals getting hurt just like messes me up. So that I had to put the book down for a second. But I digress. She goes in the house. Bird is gone. So she decides to start cleaning up and like put the bird in like her friend's jacket or something, or like in a cloth, and to bury the bird under like a willow tree or something nearby. It was very surreal and very dreamy to me in the house. Yes, it was very surreal is a good word. That's a good word to use. Yeah, I agree. Surreal is the best way to describe what happened. It almost became nightmare fuel a little bit for me, honestly. But I like, okay, so let me backtrack a little bit, and then I'll explain why it became nightmare fuel for me. So she buries the bird, but then she goes back in the house. She takes a nap on her friend's bed, and at that point, I think she wakes up, but I don't really know if she's like delirious or if it's just a surreal dream or what's happening, because she sees the bird come back to life. Not like come out of the ground, but like the bird's in the house pretending everything's fine. And then there's a point where there's a figure. She's in the dark, right? There's like, she has like a candle or something. And because I think the power went out from the blizzard, and she sees a black figure in a corner, and the figure stands up, and it's her best friend, like, hey friend, I have all my digits back. Let's talk about the Jeju uprising. I'm like, bro. I was a little bit scared. How did you handle the dog story? Not well. I didn't handle it well. So I did not handle that well at all. Anything that has to do with animals sets me off. I can't. Okay, so that and another major trigger I have. Actually, all of my triggers were in this book. I'm going to be so real with you. Animals, harm to small children is very prevalent in this book. That's another one of my big triggers. And also grapes, if you know what I mean. Trying to not get this video flagged so that people can't find it, because I think it's a really important book to talk about. But like that is so prevalent in here. We don't see it actually, like the grapes we don't see happen on page, but it's mentioned. Everything else kind of happens on page, and it's really upsetting. But it's so important. It was so poignant how she almost had to give up in order to get through the blizzard, almost trusting the process, which definitely relies on hope and faith. Yeah. Because there's so many people who lived through this historical moment who, like, their family went to be part of the what's it called? The rebellion. These are people that were farmers. These are people that were not fighters, but everyone was being targeted. There was a really significant scene as In-seon and Kyung-ah are talking, because In-seon is sharing stories that her mother told her. Ghost In-seon, something. Whoever is sharing stories about her mother, and her father, I think, was captured during the revolution. So we get her point of view of what happened with her father. We get things that happened with her cousins. And then there's also documents in the house. Oh, this is really important. Okay, yes. So here's a really important thing. Thank you for bringing up like hope and faith in the process, Hermie, because that reminded me of something. It's really important to note that In-seon, I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong, is a documentarian. So aside from being an artist, they're also a documentarian. And so that's why they have all these documents in their house and know so much about these events, is because they made films and like went around the world doing like short films on tragic events and things that have happened. So Kyung-ah reads these documents, and or these documents are kind of read to her by her friend's spirit. Like, I don't know if it's insinuating if the friend is no longer there, because by the end of the book, it kind of insinuates that the friend may still be there or may not. And it talks about people being rounded up by the military, by Japanese military soldiers, and that these tactics were actually approved and suggested as law by the American government and departments that were overseeing Jeju Island and the eradication of anyone who was deemed communist, because Jeju Island was called the Red Island because they believed that everyone on there was communist, and so they used violent action to men, women, pregnant women, children were rounded up onto the beaches, and atrocities occurred. And there was a very specific line that really got to me. So if anybody has a favorite line that they read in this book, please drop it in the comments and let me know what is your favorite line, because when I read this line, I had to stop reading. I had to put it down. Like, it was just so good. I should have annotated this. I didn't annotate this. But essentially what the line was. Oh, you know what? Let me go to my review, because I'm pretty sure I wrote it in my review, and I want to read it to you exactly as the line was, because it was so poignant. Let's see. Go to my Goodreads, I think. Yeah. So the line was, it says, the spots where they'd done the killing had been washed away by the tide. There wasn't a trace of blood. So that's why they chose to kill them there, I thought. And that line made me stop and just, it was so sad. It was so sad, because throughout this entire book, Kyung-ah is talking about these trees that are growing out of the ground and wanting to do like an artwork that has to do with trees, which she was working on with her best friend. And it's basically that there's a couple different scenes where people are questioning, like, what happens to the bodies and the spirits post-traumatic event. It is referenced in here about the Jeju tarmac, I think. The what's it called? The airport, Jeju Airport. When they were building Jeju Airport, and I think I did a little bit of research on this after, so I can't remember if I'm mixing up like what was written in the book and my research after. But when they were building the tarmac for Jeju Airport, tarmac, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. When they dug up the ground, they found a lot of remains, and those were remains from the atrocities of the eradication of individuals who lived on the island. So it was very upsetting. And so when they're talking about bodies in this book, it's a kind of about like that the bodies became one with the soil, with the ocean, and that the spirits are still present. There's one person in one of the flashbacks, I can't remember which flashback it was or which relative it was specifically, but she says after she witnessed and she survived and witnessed what was happening on the beach and saw clothes floating on the water, she remembered thinking to herself about how those people must have floated into the ocean, and that they must have been, as they are brought back into the cycle of nature, the crabs and other things in the ocean must have been part of that process, that decomposition process. And so the ocean and the sea has consumed those individuals who were victims of these horrible events. And so she doesn't eat seafood anymore because she can't create a cognitive dissonance between the horrible events that she saw and what she knows, like, of remains of them after. Yeah. Hermie says, I feel like I'll think about that part every time I'm at the beach. I cried thinking about all the people. Yes. Oh my God, me too. I feel like I'll never look at a beach the same again. I mean, it's not the first time, right? It's literally, there's unfortunately not the first time that horrible things like this have happened in these kinds of locations, but it really does put it into perspective. And how just people look at specific places and objects differently, and our trauma like follows with us. It's, oh my gosh, it was so good. It was so good. It was so heavy. So that really stuck out to me. Yeah, I cried in that part. Poetic Wandering says, yes, this really stuck out to me, but once things got better to this day, I haven't eaten a bit of anything from the water. Sea critters are what they ate away at those people are. Right, that's the line. Yes, thank you for finding that. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. They're not wrong. They're not wrong. Even plants, even thinking about, so like the trees, I think were also some of that. Like they talked about black trees, tree trunks coming out of the ground, and that these trees must have grown from the soil that was enriched with the lifeblood of the people who perished there. And it's just this cycle of life, but also the remnants of this cycle of violence. Oh my gosh. It was so heavy. Yeah, great quote. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, I'm getting the shivers. Okay. So where do we go from here? Yeah, so I guess I want to talk about Incheon's mom. Incheon's mom was a pivotal character for me in this book. I think she was one of the real protagonists here because we get a lot of the events like through her side, through her like vision of things. There's a point where I think it's her village is ransacked and burned and just like horrible things happen. I think it was her niece. Someone correct me if I'm wrong who it was, but she was out of the village when it happened, and then she goes to look for her family, ends up finding, or maybe it was her little sister. I don't remember. Someone remind me, please, if you remember, it was the little sister or like her niece or cousin or whoever. But there's a little girl who's a family member. She sees the little girl, like, dragging herself back to home on the way home, on the trail home, I guess, or something, like, near the village. She, was a victim. She's lost, a lot of, things have happened to her. I believe that someone tried to, uh, kill her, and so she's a baby. She's like a little kid. The family takes her, brings her back into what remains of the house. They don't have a lot of food. A lot of these people were starving. Because they didn't really have water or food, the mother, who was young at the time, um, uses her own blood, like, nicks her finger, and then puts it in the girl's mouth in order to give her some sustenance, give her some, like, nutrition, because that's all she can give. She's literally giving her body to this little girl in order for the little girl to live. That event was so traumatic for her that when she's much, much older, oh yeah, I think it was her little sister. When she's much, much older and she has dementia, she keeps treating her daughter as if she was the sister. Yes, it was the mother. Right. Okay, cool. Glad I remember that correctly. Thank you. Yeah, and I feel like that moment also hit me really hard, because it's like at night when the mother's dementia was causing her to have all this PTSD flashbacks, her mother would slide into bed with her daughter and put her finger in her daughter's mouth, because it's the thought of, I need to save my little sister, I need to give myself. But also layered in that, I felt like it was this, bless you, I don't know if you heard, my partner just sneezed. It was her giving everything to her daughter as well, because there was another scene in that chapter, or very close to that, where the mother has a moment of clarity, where she takes an orange, I think, or a mandarin, or a piece of fruit, breaks it in half, but gives the bigger half to her daughter. So it's like, even though cognitively she is not all there, she still has that giving in her. She still has that, like, that hope of passing along hope, or passing along what we have to the next generation. And that was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. I'm getting emotional. It was so beautiful. Okay. Keep it together, Steph. Oh, this book is so good. Okay. So if anybody has any comments on that or anything, oh my God, it was so good, you guys. It was so good. Hong Kong does this every time. I can't. I'm emotional. Okay. So loved the mom, loved Kyunga, loved Inseon, all of it. I guess a part that I struggled with a little bit, and so if anyone wants to chime in their thoughts, I'd really, really appreciate it, is the shadow of the budgies, like the shadow of the birds. Because there's a point where they're in the kitchen, they only have the like the light of the candle. And so Kyunga sees the shadow of the birds present on the wall, and she outlines it with a pencil. And I feel like that part might have gone over my head a little bit. So if anybody has an interpretation of that, or your understanding of what you think that means, that would be great. So please feel free to share that with me. Yeah, it was so good. So let's see, what else is there? I feel like there's so many things to talk about, but I'm not sure where else to go with this. Please let me know in the comments if you have anything that you would like us to discuss right now while I look at the father. I feel like the father is something worth talking about. So Inseon's father was not very present in her life, but he went through some things. I guess he was a POW, so he was a prisoner of war. He survived. What did he survive? I think because there's a couple different things that happen where they talk about what happened to the men in the society. There was a cave, like a mining cave or something, where people hid in a similar situation where hundreds of bodies were placed. I think it was to hide the evidence of what the United States was doing, but someone correct me if I'm getting that history wrong, because what I remember was that it was uncovered or mentioned that it was uncovered years and years later. I think in the recent, like within the past 20 years from now, actually, where they were trying to do reparations by digging out those caves, identifying bones, and calling family members in order to be able to put people to rest properly. And there were so many people that they weren't able to identify. One of them being, it might have been Inseon's dad. I don't remember. Maybe. This is what I get for not annotating properly. But it might have been Inseon's dad. If not, it was definitely a relative. Hermie says, I love that bit. My interpretation was just that she was struggling to accept that she hadn't gotten there in time to save them, and that it was her brain making so they weren't fully gone. Okay, that actually kind of makes sense, because the title, right, We Do Not Part, is about that like generational interconnectedness, but also just like the interconnectedness of people on like a general scale, of her and her friend, of us, of countries, of societies, of just like interconnectedness in general. And that even though time has passed and people have passed and bodies have passed, that their influence is not felt. That even if they're not physically together, they are still, through time, through history, through events, and spirit, together. So that kind of makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Hermie. That was very helpful. But yeah, so, and the dad, I think, was not so, what's the word? I don't want to say caring. He definitely cared about his family, but he was reluctant to be a hands-on figure, parental figure, because of the things that he saw happening to children. Or maybe I'm mixing it up. There was someone who was also like dealing with their actions and violence through all this, and there was like a sense of guilt somewhere. Oh my gosh, there's so much. But yeah, so Inseon's mom had to take on a brunt of raising her. So it was very sad. It was very meaningful. Oh my gosh, it was heavy. And then ultimately, in the end, Inseon spirit or something leads Kyunga to an old dried up river and leads her back out into the snow, where she continues to walk and see like the trees and the land, reminiscing on what it once was and all the events that happened there, about how like the land has changed significantly in the past 80 something years between when these events happened and then how the land is lived on now. It reflects back on those trees that were mentioned at the beginning of the book, that the trees and the plants represent what has come after the bodies that gave their life to the soil, not of their own volition, but regardless, that is pivotal to the shaping of this landscape. And it kind of ends with hope. I feel like it ends with hope. She has this candle that she's walking with that she tries not to let go. And even though there's a point where she thinks to herself, I gotta turn around and head back to the house because the candle's gonna go out soon, she has hope that her friend is leading her somewhere important. And it kind of leads off there. I ultimately rated this 4 stars, I think. Maybe like 4.25. The only reason I personally didn't give it 5 stars is just because for me, the ending, I wanted a little bit more from the ending as far as like Inseon and Kyunga and what comes after, but I also realized that that is not important. Like my wants for how this should end is not important at all to what this story is about. Hi, how are you, Sky? Gonna go back to the beginning and watch. Sorry for being late. It's Ramadan. Oh, no worries, no worries. Happy Ramadan. If anybody's celebrating, yes. I think today's day 2, right? Ramadan started yesterday. P could be Busan, old way of pronouncing it. If that's the case, that would make so much sense too. I'm gonna try to Google that after this. Thank you. Oh my gosh, this is so helpful. I'm so glad I talked to you guys about this. David says, was it just the spirit of the house or was the whole thing about the hospital and finger from a dream from Kate? That's the part I'm not sure about. I'm not entirely sure because she did have dreams. And so we don't know like how much of that was part of dream and part present because the bird who passed away appeared to Kyunga as like, hey, I'm still here. And then after that was when her friend came. So I don't know if it was insinuating that the friend's spirit was there or if it was just the dream. I'm not sure, but I'm open to hearing y'all's thoughts on that. Right? Mind blowing. I feel like this is a book that I'd be willing to read again because reading it the second time, I'm probably going to notice more things, you know? So it was so good. It was so good. Okay. So tell me in the chat if there's anything else. Last call for ideas or things that we should talk about, anything that I missed, anything that's worth talking about. But I definitely need to go back and finish reading Hong Kong's books because it's so interesting how place names change in name or pronunciation over time. Yes, it is so interesting. And it also has a lot to do with the history of how like power has shifted in those regions. So that is a whole thing in and of itself. I wonder if that's what Greek lessons is about. But Arwani says, I felt that I was a spirit or part of a dream in the house because the house scenes felt less grounded. Yeah, they definitely felt less grounded than the hospital. So that's why I felt like it was a spirit. So I think we're on the same wavelength there. Maybe Kate in the snow and everything in the house with I and the birds was a dream. Maybe? I don't know. Oh, that's really good too. Maybe she never made it out of the snow. Y'all are blowing my mind. Oh, this is so good. Okay. It's really open to interpretation. I don't know what's right. I really don't know. But even if it was, right? Hermie's like, okay. So let's say, right? Let's say Kyunga was still in the snow. Makes sense. Let's say they were still in the snow. Does that change any of the events that transpired in the house? Versus if it didn't. I don't think it does. Like the events are still they're still poignant. They still have that gravitas. Whether it's her spirit that went to the house or whether it was the spirits visiting her. Like I feel like the message might still be the same. I don't know. But that's so good. Oh, okay. Okay, actually, I'm thinking I might raise my rating to like a 4.5 after talking about this with you. Oh my gosh, it was so good. Okay, so the only other Hong Kong books that I have not read are Greek lessons. Oh, actually. Oh, and White Book. White Book. I have read The Vegetarian, I've read Human Acts, and now I've read We Do Not Part. Porter Wandering says, yeah, I don't think we would lose anything if that's the case. Yeah, I don't think so. So it's still, oh, that actually makes so much sense. That would make a lot of sense. I love this. That's so good. Oh, I got shivers. Okay. Yeah. So let me know if after this, if you can think of anything, feel free to drop it in the comments. And once again, before I start to wrap it up, because I can't think of anything else to really like unpack here, other than it's amazing. And if you're watching this post live stream, please go read it and then come back and tell us what you thought. Like, it's so good. But next month for the book club, we are reading On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century on unpacking how fascism functions and how to deal with fascism. And then we are also reading Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. And if you would like to join our Discord to talk about the book club, it is now accessible by becoming a channel member, a member of my channel at any level, and you get access to the book club. So you can support my channel, and also like we stay informed, we give each other tips, we talk about what's going on in the news. We're a little bit of a support group, I like to think, with everything that's happening in the world, and talk and unpacking the world around us through literature. Because literature and staying informed and reading is an act of resistance. And that's why I started this whole book club. So if you'd like to join us, check out the front page of my channel where you can join to become a member. But if you don't want to join and you want to just talk about the books with us, I post it on all of my social media. So you can see what we're reading every month and then just pop into the live streams and check it out from there. Yeah, she did take a hard fall. Yes. And I'm so, you know what? I'm so surprised I didn't think about that. Because it was a whole scene. It was a whole thing. The scene where she basically gives up in the snow. And now reflecting on it in retrospect, it's like, I remember thinking to myself, how did she make it through that? But maybe it's just perseverance, like, I guess. But maybe that just shows my lack of information around how hypothermia works. I don't know. Yeah, that makes so much sense. I'm starting to think that David's right. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, either way, it was great. Okay, I think I'm going to bump my rating up to 4.5 stars. So yeah, thank you everybody for being here. And if you're here afterwards, again, please drop it in the chat. Let me know what you think about this, any of this. I'm so excited to talk to you all next month about Giovanni's Room and On Tyranny. And I guess I'll be back at 3 p.m. today for another live stream because my sci-fi book club is going to be talking about Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. And man, I have thoughts about this. So that's really exciting. Okay. But thank you guys. I think I'm going to sign off now. So have a great day, everybody. See you soon.